It was a year that would eventually produce political agreement, but 1998 began, like so many others, with news of a murder. Edmund Traynor had been celebrating the new year in Belfast's Clifton Tavern when Loyalist gunmen entered the bar and opened fire. It was just the first of a brutal series of murders in the month of January. At his funeral, Bishop Patrick Walsh urged the politicians to speed up their search for peace.
Let there be an end of talking at one another. Let us see you talking with one another, working together, struggling together.
But the peace process was in deep trouble. Loyalist prisoners had withdrawn their support. On the 8th of January, television cameras were allowed into the maze for the first time.
Somebody close that grill.
The inmates had been angered by media reports that they were, to all intents and purposes, in control of the jail, and that some of Northern Ireland's most notorious terrorists led a cushy existence free from the control of prison staff. They told reporters they didn't want to talk about politics.
I would appreciate if nobody asks us questions on the political front or our ceasefire. It's just to do with the rubbish that's being printed in the press, i.e. the sacks, the booze, the drums.
But inevitably, at this most bizarre of news conferences, the questioning turned to events outside the prison and the fact that the Secretary of State was due to visit the next day.
The door's open for all options are open. Just hopefully we can come to some sort of arrangement.
You've spoken this week to Gary McMichael, you've spoken to David Trimble and John Taylor. Will this meeting with Mo Mowlam, do you think it has the potential to change the situation, given that so many prisoners have withdrawn support from the process?
I hope so.
You hope so?
Less than 24 hours later, the Loyalist wings of the maze welcomed the government's most senior representative in Northern Ireland. It was the biggest gamble of Mo Mowlam's political career, but it was a gamble that paid off. The talks process was back on track.
I think that we should take stock and recognise how close we have come to the end of this process and the inevitable consequences, horrific as they may be, that we faced.
Within days, the killings resumed. Terry Enright, a doorman at the Space nightclub in Belfast, was murdered by Loyalists. The keen sportsman was a popular figure with youth groups in the west of the city. Ironically, his employer was the sister of leading Progressive Unionist Party member David Irvine. Jerry Adams, an uncle of Mr. Enright's wife, paid his condolences. But much more violence was to come.
Just an ordinary fella, you know, very friendly to everybody and enjoyed the crack in the bar, and that's the sort of person he was. I'll always remember him as having always had a smile on his face.
Jim's murder has left a young widow and 4 fatherless children simply because he was a Protestant businessman trying to earn a living. He died because of his beliefs.
My husband died 9 years ago, and he was like a surrogate father to my 3 boys. You know, he was always there for them, and especially the youngest one, who's called after him.
Ben was a very, very nice gentleman in every way. All he done was work and live for his family and his kids and his grandkids.
Most people, in fact, registered the same disgust, and particularly when they heard the details of Liam Conway's, you know, the one brother blind, the other partially impaired, and the sister, the breadwinner.
If you asked John to do something, he was there on the minute and done it for you. He helped everybody. He never, ever, I know people can say things like this when somebody dies, but John McColgan was a big, gentle giant.
Some of the murders were finally admitted by the UFF, causing major problems for the Ulster Democratic Party, a signatory to the Mitchell Principles of Non-Violence. As the political talks moved to Lancaster House in London, its representatives decided to jump ship before their inevitable expulsion.
We remain as fundamentally committed to the process of negotiations and this peace process today as we did yesterday, as we did 3 years ago.
Their departure cast further doubt on the prospects of success in the talks, but the drama wasn't over yet. A document drawn up by the British and Irish governments contained proposals for cross-border institutions which angered some senior unionists.
And I've got the framework document here. That's what we think of the framework document.
The SDLP insisted that cross-border structures were essential if their support was to be retained.
Without that, there will be no agreement, because the SDLP will not agree to any type of arrangement that doesn't have the North-South body with executive power.
The continuing violence and lack of political progress brought people power onto the streets. But even this was marred by controversy.
Can we ask, please, to respect the grief of those who have died?
Tell us that we're not welcome. This is our turn. We're well into unionists. We're well into York men.
Whenever unionists try to take part in this, those banners was an insult. And the other thing is that we see us as Sinn Féin with the Republican agenda dancing in us in Catholics' graves.
Are you finished, lads?
White score.
No, I'm not finished.
Right.
Stop it.
Billy, take it
I'm
easy.
not finished.
Well, take it
I think
easy.
that was a disgrace.
What was a disgrace?
Those banners.
What banners? Come on in here and talk here.
We were there to commemorate the innocent Catholics that were killed. As far as we're concerned, those Catholics shouldn't have been killed.
Come on and talk here.
Meanwhile, the government moved to heal old wounds with the announcement of a new inquiry into Bloody Sunday.
We believe that the weight of material now available is such that these events require re-examination.
Do not fire back for the moment.
Let us hope now that the steps that he is putting in place today will finally produce the full truth and be a major part of the healing process in our divided community.
The murder of Brendan Campbell early in February put pressure on Sinn Féin. It was one of two killings which the police had blamed on the IRA. It became increasingly certain that the violence would see Republicans following the UDP out of the political talks. As the negotiations moved to Dublin, Sinn Féin took legal advice to avert their expulsion. They insisted they had the right to remain at the talks table in Dublin Castle. The palatial surroundings were a contrast to the earthy language of Gerry Adams.
I am absolutely pissed off with trying to make this thing work, and those who have no interest in making it work seize upon two men being killed to exploit it and to bring this process down.
Right, thank you.
In the end, the legal action at Dublin's four courts became somewhat academic. Further violence, this time the abduction and murder of Kevin Conway, whose body was found in a farmhouse in County Armagh, simply reinforced the demands of Sinn Féin's opponents that the party should be given its marching orders. As soon as the talks returned to Belfast, that's exactly what happened.
Well, we're out, but we're not down. We are absolutely committed to our quest for equality, for justice, for peace, and for freedom.
Within hours, there were protests on the streets. Sinn Féin supporters chose the police as a convenient target for their anger.
No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
The next day, dissident Republicans bombed the picturesque town of Moira. The devastation was extensive. Many buildings had to be demolished, and much of the damage was in residential areas. Just 48 hours later, similar destruction was visited upon Portadown. It might not have been the work of the Provisional IRA, but to some, the distinction was irrelevant.
I think the peace process is up the left because it's obvious that the IRA do not want to partake in it. After what they've done here in Portadown at the weekend in Moira, what chance has the peace process got now?
As if to turn the clock back even further, postal workers were hurt by a letter bomb at the Royal Mail's main sorting office. It caused the reintroduction of the so-called Belfast slot on letterboxes, allowing only the thinnest mail to be posted. Even more shocking events were to come. Two friends, one Catholic, the other Protestant, were murdered in Points Pass. As they enjoyed a drink in a local pub, Damien Traynor and Philip Allen were gunned down by loyalist terrorists. The killings brought unionists and nationalists together in condemnation, but tore the heart out of a village which had been largely untouched by the Troubles.
hard to take in just, but it's stuck here.
What are people saying in the village about what happened?
Well, I thought it never come to them. That's been quite truthful.
The Maze prison was soon to witness its second killing in less than 3 months. David Keyes, who'd been charged with the Points Pass attack, was brutally murdered by loyalists.
We have 2 people murdered within a prison. We have a prisoner walking out dressed up as a woman. We have an escape taking place where 40 tons of soil can be hidden without anybody seeing it. And the minister just coolly says there's not going to be an inquiry, nobody's going to resign, everything's all right, next business please. I mean, that just is not satisfactory.
But the Secretary of State refused to do the DUP's bidding.
We are certainly responding, and resignations are not on the table.
By St. Patrick's Day, the political focus had shifted to America, where the usual displays of all things Irish had taken on a new and more serious feel as the main players gathered in the knowledge that the world's only remaining superpower expected results. Behind the presentation of the Shamrock, there was a more serious message.
This is the chance of a lifetime for peace in Ireland. You must get it done. You must do it for yourselves and your children. It is too late for those who have already been killed by the sectarian violence of the last 3 decades. But you can do it, and you must, now.
On the streets of Washington, all was not well.
I'm bloody lost. The taxi had to drop me off. I'm going to the Speaker's lunch. Straight over here.
At the Irish American Fund dinner, the usual guests turned up. But the focus this year was the very real possibility of a breakthrough in what expatriates know as the old country. For the first time, former enemies broke bread in the same room.
What we all now need, above all else, is courage. We need the courage to take the risks that have to be taken, and courage to confront the strident voices of those on the sidelines.
The social niceties would be short-lived. As the politicians returned home, they were given a stark timetable for success.
Participants will then reconvene on Monday, April 6th, and will remain in session continuously until these negotiations are concluded. We hope and expect that that can be accomplished by Thursday, April 9th.
The INLA made its murderous contribution to the negotiations by taking the life of Cyril Stewart, a 52-year-old former policeman who was gunned down while shopping with his wife in Armagh. The government's plans to win public support for any eventual agreement were leaked to the DUP.
This document is dynamite. It exposes the government as prepared to use filthy and deceitful practices in order to achieve what, in their terms, will be, quote, the right result over the heads of the people of Northern Ireland.
Hands up, yes. I do want the public to say yes. But this is about not telling the public to say yes. I can't tell the public. If I tell the public, they'll certainly vote the other way. What this is about getting information so that I can get it into the public domain. Of course I want a yes vote. I haven't worked for 10 months for a no vote.
Meanwhile, the positions of the parties seemed to be as different as day and night.
You say
process.
I say
process.
You say
process.
And I say
process.
Either, and either, neither. Let's call the whole thing off. Yes, you like
process.
And I like
process.
You like
process.
I like
process. 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 Process.
Let's call the whole thing off.
Good morning. Can I just begin by saying that due to the good progress that we made yesterday, we're going to bring the deadline forward from next Thursday till tomorrow.
What's the date?
But for the next few days, jokes would be thin on the ground.
Articles 2 and 3 are the key to unlock the process.
If the Unionist Party is suggesting that we remove from our constitution the birthright and the allegiance of Northern nationalists, then that's a bridge too far.
We have another week to deal with these issues.
This reminds me of 1974.
We do not intend to be bullied, browbeaten or pushed around by these sort of tactics.
There's a buzz about, but there's also trepidation.
If any one of them read this and said, "Great, where do I sign?" we probably have failed.
I wouldn't touch it with a 40-foot pole.
Are they forgetting that there are other parties in these negotiations?
If the Prime Minister wants a deal, he better get here fast.
A day like today, I mean, it's not a day for sort of sound bites, really. We can leave those at home, but I feel the hand of history upon our shoulder in respect of this. I really do. And I just think we need to acknowledge that and respond to it. Now, maybe it's impossible to find a way through. Maybe even with the best faith in the world, you can't do it. But it's right to try. So I'm here to try.
The talks continued against the background of yet another murder. Trevor Deeney was shot dead by the IRA in Londonderry. At the same time, Bertie Ahern's mother died, and he was forced to leave the talks to attend her funeral. Despite his personal grief, he returned to Belfast that evening as the deadline for agreement drew near. As the politicians came closer to agreement, the world's media set up shop in the grounds of Stormont.
He feels that if that happens...
Others arrived too in the hope that their presence would encourage the prospects of success.
We came here to try to make the politicians listen and try to make peace.
As the deal reached completion, David Trimble took it to his party executive for its approval. He won support inside Ulster Unionist headquarters, but the story outside was very different. This was just the start of his problems as he tried to keep colleagues on board.
It's 4.5 hours to go to the deadline for decision, and still the parties beaver away at Stormont, trying to chew their way through the log jams which block the way to agreement.
Reporters and camera crews concentrated on the windows of the talks building as they tried to gauge the chances of a deal being done. Outside, opponents of any possible agreement arrived in force.
The enemies of Ulster are now allowed into Stormont. The loyalists of Ulster have been locked out of Stormont.
Once again, Ian Paisley marched his supporters to the top of a hill.
We've got here, I asked that you'd get up here as far as the monument. No, we've done that.
We're going for it!
No!
The DUP's tactics were opposed by some loyalists who appeared at a subsequent news conference.
This is a press conference, and you're not press men. You belong to parties that are opposed to my party. Well, just shut up. Just shut up.
People shut up or gone.
You have your press conference later. Right. You have your own press conference with your buddy Jerry Adams. Have it, and you'll be very welcome to it. Let me say to you tonight.
Not one of you can give out a number.
Let
you
me
call yourselves loyalists.
Ian, where are you taking us? Ian, where are you going to take us?
The Grando to New York, Mark 1 and Mark 2.
See,
not to Dublin anyhow.
Well, I wish you would walk out.
As the night wore on, the likelihood of agreement began to increase.
Certainly we're well on our way towards an agreement.
I never thought in my lifetime I would see it. It's here. We all had, I suppose, some degree of faith and took the opportunity. It's now happened, or it's about to happen.
The indications of success were there before any official announcement. As the April snow fell over Stormont and night became day, the BBC obtained the first and only leaked copy of the agreement.
This is it.
This is the
You
agreement.
have it in your hand.
I have it in my hand. 67 pages.
Only the official procedures remained as the parties engaged in a final plenary session of the talks.
I have that bittersweet feeling that comes in life. I'm dying to leave, but I hate to go.
In these past few days, the irresistible force, the political will, has met the immovable object, the legacy of the past, and it has actually moved it. The idea that if one side wins something in Northern Ireland, the other loses is gone. The essence of what we have agreed is a choice. We are all winners or all losers. It is mutually assured benefit or mutually assured destruction here.
And today's historic agreement marks a new beginning for all of us in Northern Ireland, on the island of Ireland, and in these islands. It's a day we should treasure, a day when agreement and accommodation have taken the place of difference and division. And today is about the promise of a bright future.
Northern Ireland today has the promise of a springtime of peace. The agreement that has emerged from the Northern Ireland peace talks opens the way for the people there to build a society based on enduring peace, justice, and equality.
Finally, the agreement is printed and sent to every household in Northern Ireland. The campaign for its rejection begins almost instantly. At the Ulster Hall, dissident Ulster Unionist MPs join the DUP and the UK Unionists on the main platform.
Whenever you go out of here tonight, don't go home and say it's a great night in the Ulster Hall last night, and Wally Ross and Ian Paisley and that chap McCartney and Roy Beggs and all the rest of them spoke very well, and sit and watch it on the TV. Oh no, don't do that. Get out on the streets and the towns and the villages and the fields. Visit every loyal home, and even the ones you're a bit doubtful about.
The Orange Order took some time to decide where it stood, but its leaders were under pressure to say no.
If they decide to stand for the people of Ulster and opposing this betrayal, then we'll join with them. If they don't do that, then it's another story.
Failing clarification of certain vital issues cannot recommend it to the people of Ulster.
The debate was sharpened by further violence. On the 17th of April, Mark McNeil was murdered at the Apollo Taxis depot in West Belfast, apparently the victim of a grudge killing by the INLA. Then 4 days later, Adrian Lampf was shot dead by loyalists in a council yard in Portadown. Meanwhile, the political cabaret of the Northern Ireland Forum became a thing of the past.
I am. Don't you be slobbering, okay?
Well, would you please address me?
I'll throw that there, right?
Mr. Smith.
The Forum had served its purpose and would be replaced by the new Assembly. On the streets, the killing went on. Kieran Heffron, another victim of the LVF, was found shot dead at the entrance to Crumlin railway station. Back in the political arena, the campaign for a yes vote in the referendum began in earnest, even though the subtleties were lost on passers-by.
What's the yes for?
The governments have agreed, the political parties have agreed. Now it's up to us as voters, and we're saying a resounding yes.
Those political parties who weren't assured of a resounding yes began their campaigns to sell the agreement to their supporters. The Ulster Unionists and Sinn Féin sounded as if they were talking about two different documents.
We can say with confidence that if people vote yes, they are voting yes for the Union.
It does weaken the Union. It is All Ireland in character.
It's not we that are going into the Dáil, but Republicans that are going into Stormont. And that epitomises the change that has occurred.
Soon Northern Ireland's district councils lined up to offer their verdicts, and Sinn Féin prepared to take the issue to a special party conference. The government's public relations campaign continued apace with the help of the former Prime Minister. It was the start of a concerted effort to win over the younger voters.
Are we ready? Yeah.
I believe it is absolutely right to vote yes rather than no. I understand why people like Mr. McCartney and Mr. Paisley want to say no. I just believe they're wrong.
This sort of
big government interference is going to be rejected because it's bullying, it's manipulative, it's wrong, it's undemocratic, and fundamentally, it's fascist.
At the Sinn Féin conference, the seeds of controversy were sown when the Balcombe Street gang appeared after being released from jail for the occasion. They received a hero's welcome, but with hindsight, this triumphant moment began to look like a misjudgment. In any event, some hardliners continue to argue against any deal with unionists.
I, for one, will not be bound by the confines of the Good Friday Agreement. I do not accept the unionist veto, and I do not accept the legitimacy of the southern state.
In the end, however, the strategy of Gerry Adams and the Sinn Féin leadership won the day, with an overwhelming vote in favour of their decision to sign the agreement. Mo Mowlam's decision to release the Balcombe Street gang and allow such scenes of triumphalism caused outrage.
You're releasing them. You'll have to stand before Almighty God one day to give an account.
The Secretary of State was forced to say sorry.
I have tried occasionally to take an extra step to make sure that we actually make the process work, and that's what I did at the weekend. I apologise for the hurt I've caused people, particularly to those families and friends of victims that find it difficult.
The government's response to the needs of victims was to establish a committee led by Sir Kenneth Bloomfield to recognise their suffering.
I wanted, if I could, to be a megaphone through which the voice of the victim could be more clearly heard. And as I went forward, I found that their needs in many cases spoke all too eloquently for themselves.
There was more controversy and hurt as Milltown Cemetery killer Michael Stone appeared at an Ulster Democratic Party rally in the Ulster Hall. Like the Balcombe Street gang at the Sinn Féin Ardèche just 4 days earlier, he was feted as a hero, winning unanimous applause. This bizarre event also included satirical attacks on other unionists. The Loyalist Volunteer Force, which had been responsible for some of the most brutal killings in previous months, declared a ceasefire a week before referendum day. Some saw it as a cynical ploy by the terror group to have its prisoners included in the early release scheme. On the 19th of May, supporters of the agreement enjoyed the biggest coup of the referendum campaign. Ash and U2 appeared at the Waterfront Hall. It gave David Trimble and John Hume the opportunity to send a powerful message around the world.
We want them to join together with us on this stage.
It is quite evident that Mr. Trimble has joined the Pan-Nationalist Front and he's now going to rock and roll. He's rocking anyway, and he'll be rolling after the 22nd.
To bolster David Trimble's position and to allay the fears of many unionists, Tony Blair gave his personal pledge that the agreement wouldn't weaken Northern Ireland's position within the United Kingdom. But despite the assurances, many opponents of the Stormont Accord believed the Prime Minister was signing away their birthright. As he toured the town of Hollywood, his every step was dogged by the UK unionists.
There's a lot of us who'll say no, Blair. Please ask 2 questions. There you are. Where are the pledges? Where are the pledges? Won't speak. I wanted to ask.
Mr. McCartney, it doesn't sound like you've got the support of the people here.
These are random mob.
Excuse me, Mr. McCartney.
Mr. McCartney.
I'm sorry, I object to you accusing this of it being a rental mob. I'm sorry, I came here. I didn't know the Prime Minister was coming. I'm a local Hollywood person.
Yes, and so am I.
So
is this a rental mob?
This is not a rental mob.
David Trimble, meanwhile, had the support of a former chief constable as he tried to convince sceptical unionist voters.
Ulster still says no.
The next stop was a TV debate.
1972, Ian was urging the government to abolish Stormont, and they did. And then what happened? What happened over the years? What happened? We had people marching up and down hills, waving bits of paper. We had third forces. We had Ulster Resistance and its berets, and you dropped them pretty quick when some of them got into trouble. And in those 25 years, what has been achieved?
Here is Mr. Trimble's paper
in the last to
destroy the Union.
In the last 2.5 years, I have been giving the people a chance.
1988, he said he was prepared to break the Union.
But the final say rested with the people. On the 22nd of May, voters all over Northern Ireland went to the polls to decide their future. Around 1 million votes were counted by hand by 200 bank staff recruited specially for the occasion. It wasn't long before the likely outcome became clear.
Yes, 71.12%.
On the question of decommissioning, Jeremy Paxman was disarmed by Mo Mowlam.
We have to take this as a package, and in relation to decommissioning, there is built into this process, which is why the next 6 months isn't going to be easy, fully accept that you can't have one bit of the package without the other.
We're doing the terrible media thing of looking for problems when actually there's something you think that's terribly positive about this vote that we ought to be marking too.
That's right.
Secretary of State, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
In favour? Very good. Very good, then maybe we'll have more days out like this without any trouble.
Delighted to get you a drive.
I think we're on the right road. Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Trying to make ends meet, you're a slave to money, then you die.
In the Republic, the vote was even more decisive. 95% of the huge turnout said yes. Back at Stormont, people were treated to a special concert by what's-his-name.
Sir Elton John. Thank you.
Well, you deserve some hope, and you deserve some peace. And I pray that you get it,
There was no getting away from the fact that decommissioning was very much a live issue. The sceptics met Tony Blair to maintain the pressure.
We intend, to use Dr. Paisley's expression, to nail their hides to the fence on these commitments that they have given.
But there were two other issues which would be the subject of intense debate in the coming months. The first was the early release of prisoners, one of the provisions of the agreement reached on Good Friday. The other was the future of the RUC, which is now in the hands of the former Governor of Hong Kong, Chris Patten, and his police commission. As the Assembly elections approached, Newton Hamilton was devastated by another Republican bomb attack. One woman who'd lost her home in a previous bombing in Market Hill lost her business in this one.
They've been given every opportunity through both the referendum and the elections tomorrow to have their say. Now, if these people want peace, that's the way they should be doing it, not planting bombs.
Hurried arrangements were made to relocate the polling station to a building that hadn't been badly damaged. Elsewhere, the infighting continued among the various shades of unionism as the party leaders went to cast their votes.
I suppose you want to comment.
Some in the media discovered that the path of democracy was a rocky one. As the results began to trickle in, the DUP made early gains at the expense of the Ulster Unionists.
Well, what about the prisoners? You're the truthful.
The prisoners are going to get out, Sam. I voted against it.
In 28 months' time, 2/3 would have made it anybody.
Catch yourself on, Sam. Catch yourself on.
Lies. You are telling lies.
Yeah, catch yourself on, Sam.
I don't want to continue this battle with Jeffrey. I listened to him gloating over the difficulties that he and others like him have created in the party, and I'm saddened rather than angry by what has happened.
Well, I think Ken McGuinness, who was the director of our election campaign, should hold his head in shame today. He has presided over one of the biggest electoral disasters for the Ulster Unionist Party in recent years, so I don't think Ken McGuinness should be pointing the finger at anyone.
As two generations of the Paisley family celebrated victory, the deputy leader of the Ulster Unionists, John Taylor, became the butt of humour for his opponents.
Dublin is sick. Hear, hear. Mr. Tony Blair is sick. His lies has caught on him, and the sickest man of all is David Trimble.
What they're in danger of doing is undermining the rights of the Unionist people, because the whole world will see them as fascists if they try to wreck this agreement.
The SDLP had reason to celebrate, as many of its leading figures were returned as Assembly members. But the Ulster Democratic Party was drowning its sorrows as it failed to win a single seat. The Women's Coalition did surprisingly well, with two candidates heading for Stormont.
I got elected. Can you hear me? I've got elected. Tell the children.
The lure of a new job as presiding officer of the Assembly caused the Alliance leader, John Alderdice, to quit party politics.
It's not that I'm bailing out, but I think it's important in a situation like this to decide what you're setting for yourself as your standards, and then to hand things over in the best shape that you can to your successor.
That is one of self-interest rather than party interest. And as one who has been deputy leader over this past number of years, working closely with John, I find that hard to say, but I think that is the reality of the situation.
Before the politicians even had time to take their seats, there was the unresolved issue of Drumcree. For the third year running, the dispute over the Orange Parade along Portadown's Garvaghey Road threatened to destabilise Northern Ireland. Compromise was as far away as ever. But tragedy was near at hand. 3 young brothers would die in the coming days, and just over a month later, the road to a more peaceful future would be torn up by the single greatest act of mass murder since the Troubles began.
Fed up with hearing the word historic.
Like it or not, historic was a word that would be used often in 1998, usually with some justification. The elected representatives arrived at Stormont to take part in the first all-inclusive assembly since the foundation of the state. For some, it was a step into the unknown.
First thing they've given me is a red card. David Beckham, here I come. So someone else said that I may be the referee here today.
On the surface, it looked like a snapshot of harmony in action, but it was only a short time before the old cultural differences were brought to a head in a sharp exchange of language.
Major by Dunnegan a cor manners are in farsion. A cor are Ian Starwell or I, August O'Shaw Mark, a pager in.
Can I have order for the speaker, please? Order, please.
We could understand them.
Can I have order and due respect in the chamber, please?
The credibility of David Trimble has so far gone down that had he been Pinocchio, I think he probably could have poked me with his nose from where he's sitting, let alone.
It's also very good for the first time for me to see someone like Sammy Wilson, who I've never met in my life, and it's really great to see him today with his clothes on.
Even when it came to serious business, the main exchanges in the Assembly were heavy with bitterness.
Mr. Adams talked, let us think of people. I'm thinking today of the people, of those that were murdered by his cohorts, the families that were smashed, the people that were rent in sorrow. I'm thinking of vegetables, people turned into vegetables by IRA violence today. That's who I'm thinking of.
We all have enough reasons to tell our grievances. We can all engage in whataboutery. We can all point out what was done to us and done to our communities. This time, let all the fellows and girls join together in ensuring that what we do is going to be the right thing for the people, and the only people who count, the people on this island, especially those by whom are elected in Northern Ireland.
We have started on the long march towards that better future.
Remember, give way.
And we are determined to continue that, despite the difficulties that present themselves.
Be inclusive, David.
We are determined to see that succeed for the benefit of all of this society. And that is that opportunity that must not be discarded now.
Congratulate both of you on being elected first First Minister in Northern Ireland and first Deputy First Minister in Northern Ireland.
This moment of reconciliation was not reflected in the world outside. As Drumcree approached, several Catholic churches were firebombed by loyalists. Tony Blair, eyewitness to so much in Northern Ireland since his election as Prime Minister, was there to see the damage for himself. On the 3rd of July, Bangor was the scene of another murder by paramilitaries. William Paul, a father of 6 and a former UVF member, was shot outside his home. More trouble looked certain as the Parades Commission banned the march along Portadown's Garvaghey Road after the church service at Drumcree. The lines were drawn for yet another confrontation between unionism and nationalism in County Armagh and further afield.
And nationalism is communism, and I would say that they should not in any way give in to this.
Symbolically, Loyal Orange Lodge No. 1 took the lead in marching to the barricades. They were cheered by supporters but ultimately had to turn back, having made their protest. Another controversial parade in Belfast was finally allowed to proceed.
We now think it's sensible to break the cycle as far as the Lower Omagh Road is concerned, as far as this particular parade is concerned.
It made little difference at Drumcree, where tensions mounted and confrontation between loyalists and the security forces exploded into violence. As the night wore on, the trouble intensified, and the police and army were facing what amounted to a loyalist revolt against the rule of law. Soon there was a roll call of police casualties.
There were over 30 police officers injured, 5 of whom have been taken to hospital. 4 were injured as a result of a nail bomb having been thrown and injuries sustained as a result of that, and the other was hit by a missile in the face.
This battlefield for the right to march exposed the increasing gulf between the loyal orders and those they had regarded as their fellow British citizens and protectors. The security forces and the marchers settled in for a long test of each other's nerve. Soon, Drumcree would witness scenes reminiscent of wartime.
People are deeply committed to being here. They've got that reserve that they've come through 5-6 days, and even as the time goes on, their determination to stay here is all the more. I think that's something that Tony Blair and Mo Mowlam and the other members of the British government need to bear in mind. One of the things that I would say to Tony Blair, that he needs to be careful that Drumcree doesn't become his Bloody Sunday.
Any government would have been worried as the events of July unfolded. The pattern of previous years was repeated, and the security forces found themselves dealing with both loyalist and Republican rioters. no one was willing to predict where it would lead. But the petrol bombing of Catholic homes in Portadown turned out to be an omen for tragic events to come.
Because of this issue over Drumcree, we had the previous government capitulate and give in and allow them down to Gavaki Road after an attack on our homes. And as a result of that, year in, after that, we have been attacked and abused in our homes. And we ask now that the British government stand up, act responsibly, and stop this process. We need to feel safe in our homes.
Have you been intimidated?
Special advice lines were established to help the victims of the violence. But the sense of fear was widespread, not just in Portadown. The streets of Belfast were deserted. Even the busiest areas of the city resembled a ghost town, as people stayed at home in case Northern Ireland descended into more serious unrest. The situation at Drumcree was cranked up to new levels of tension. The sound of explosions and gunfire punctured the air as loyalist terrorists mingled with the protesters. But worse was to come. In the early hours of the 12th of July, a petrol bomb was thrown into a house in a mainly loyalist estate in Ballymoney. The inside of the building was destroyed. Along with it went the lives of 3 young brothers, Richard, Mark and Jason Quinn. The tragedy stopped Northern Ireland in its tracks. Among those who expressed horror at this new threshold of brutality was the Orange Order's County Armagh chaplain, the Reverend William Bingham, who spoke at a church service the next day.
After last night's atrocious act, a 15-minute walk down Gavaki Road by the Orange Order would be a very hollow victory, because it would be in the shadow of 3 coffins, of little boys who wouldn't even know what the Orange Order is about.
The march along Belfast's Omo Road went ahead as planned. Those opposed to it held a silent protest, complete with banners referring to the tragedy in Ballymoney. But the event was also disrupted by a bomb scare. A controlled explosion was carried out, but the warning turned out to be a hoax. The Orangemen demonstrated their right to march. Soon, however, differences of opinion began to emerge within the loyal orders, becoming public as Mr. Bingham addressed marchers on the 12th of July. The resulting divisions are still a major threat to the unity of the Orange Order.
Where's John O'Callaghan? IRA more than
Now there was a man welcoming that platform who actually stabbed a man and put it down. Stabbed him in the back when they were at their most need. That man told people to pack up and go home, and now we are still going to put it down. But ask how many of those people on the platform are going.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. How are you doing there? I think I've anything to say. You know, I did what I said on the pulpit, and I think people listened well. And as you can see, the vast majority of Orange people are behind us. Just to get a few people who. But I'm fine. That's fine. Difficult, Mr. Bingham. No problem. Don't worry, Angela. No, I'll not. I'll not. Thank you.
The funeral of the Quinn brothers took place on the 14th of July. Their devastated mother, Chrissy, revealed that she would never return to her former home in Ballymoney and regretted remaining there after previous sectarian threats.
I wish I hadn't stayed there. I heard him shouting at me.
The The tragedy shocked many people into a realization that nothing could be worth the sacrifice of 3 young lives. The camp at Drumcree dwindled to just a few token demonstrators, and the Church of Ireland closed off its land around the church. The heart had gone out of the protest, and shortly afterwards, the world lost interest in the events at Portadown. On the 19th of July, a so-called punishment attack claimed the life of 33-year-old Andrew Kearney. He was left to bleed to death by a Republican gang. Soon, yet another town centre felt the effects of dissident republicanism. In one sense, Banbridge was lucky because only property was damaged by the bomb. With foresight, Omagh would have prayed for such an outcome. On the 15th of August, the single greatest act of mass murder in the history of the Troubles was perpetrated on the people of this County Tyrone town. No words could describe the horror, but the Chief Constable tried.
Innocent, decent people on a Saturday afternoon, men, women and children, Catholic, Protestant, totally indiscriminate bloody murder.
Amid the chaos and carnage, the authorities issued a television and radio appeal for off-duty medical staff to go immediately to the local hospital. They were all needed. Families who'd been shopping together only minutes before were separated in the confusion.
I have a wee fellow there. I don't know what he'd be like after this now, traumatised. And the wife, she's now been transferred. I don't know what's going to happen. There's what I'm left with there tonight. 2 bags of clothes destroyed. The clothes will be all right again. But I'm telling you, if they could see that now, I'd like to just... Well, I'm just fed up with the whole carry-on.
We went to the hospital. I found my mother straight away. She told me that Alan was missing. I says, right, there's nothing we can... I checked the wards and everything. I says, there's nothing we can do here. So me and him, we carried people off. We carried bits of people off. We carried everything off. Legs, whatever, anything was there, like arms, everything, like, you know. We took about 40 people off buses and rovers and everything. I held drips, whatever I could to help people, like, hoping at the same time my brother was living, like, you know, because we knew that they'd been taking people to other hospitals. Like.
And then you find out today that he had anything?
I found out about... I didn't find out. I found out about 6 o'clock this morning that he may be dead, but it wasn't official. Only today when we went to the morgue, me, my sister and my 2 friends went to the morgue and we seen the young boy, an innocent young man.
Even experienced doctors were shocked by what they'd seen.
It was a battlefield. When I arrived at the hospital, there were so many patients injured that one didn't know where to start. Let me not see this sort of thing again. It is dastardly, and I sincerely hope this will be the very last time that they will do this act. There's very little else I'm going to say because it has upset me immensely.
28 people were killed that Saturday afternoon. Another would die in hospital some weeks later. A mother, her young daughter, and her unborn twins were among the victims. The massacre sent a shockwave of revulsion around the world. There was utter disbelief that this could have happened in the same year as a political agreement, and the question no one could answer was why.
I can't believe that I've been involved in the bomb. And I suppose really I'm one of the lucky ones.
I'd rather be a mother of someone that had lost a son than a mother of someone who had taken someone's life.
I've lost not only my wife, I've lost my soulmate. And not many people have that. And they haven't just destroyed my wife, they've destroyed me. If they get a life sentence, I'm started mine now, and I'm not going to get no parole from nobody.
President Mary McAleese was the first of a series of high-profile visitors to Omagh in the coming days.
I came here today, like so many people,
to show how much I care about the people of Omagh, to show the pity and the compassion fundamentally I have for the people whose lives have been so devastated by this act of the most extraordinary evil and anarchy ever to be visited on the people of this island.
Condemnation came from a new quarter.
To reiterate my condemnation, this action was wrong, totally and absolutely wrong. To call upon whoever was involved to admit responsibility for their involvement and to cease these actions.
For those who have been bereaved.
While every constitutional political party on the island joined in the condemnation, Francis Mackey, a leading member of the 32 County Sovereignty Committee and of Omagh District Council, refused to do so. He was ostracised in Omagh and hounded by the world's media.
Do you condemn the bombing?
No amount of words from me will in any way alleviate the suffering of the bereaved and the injured. I have categorically stated that no justification under any circumstances can be made for what took place in Omagh.
2 of those who died in the bombing were Spanish tourists. Their injured friends were flown home to Madrid by military transport plane. Prince Charles arrived to pay his respects, laying a bouquet of flowers picked from his garden at Highgrove that morning. The royal visitor toured a broken town and saw scenes reminiscent of his trip to Enniskillen 11 years previously. But in Northern Ireland's catalogue of horrors, this was even worse. As the hunt for the bombers went on, the prince met the police officers in charge of the investigation.
But obviously I'm as appalled and shattered as so many other people are in this country and elsewhere about the horrifying disaster and tragedy on Saturday. The least I can do is come here and show my sympathy and support, in particular for all those who've carried the worst of the burden.
A traumatized policeman recalled the moments after the bomb went off.
I stayed with this one young girl, and I can just remember holding the young girl's hand and just telling her it's going to be all right. She'll be okay. I was at her funeral today.
Medical staff gave their own accounts of the agonizing events of that awful day.
There was a lady and she had her family with her. There was nothing more could be done and she was dead. And she was taken off a trolley and put on the floor. But the decision was made because someone was living, needed the trolley. It was an awful hard decision for anyone in our profession. But it had to be made, and it had to be made quickly.
Churches as far apart as Donegal and Madrid were touched by the tragedy of the Omagh bombing as communities buried their dead. On the Saturday after the attack came the official act of remembrance. The clock seemed frozen at the moment when a week before, the soul had been torn from this ordinary market town.
You can have my heart, but it isn't new. It's been used and broken and only comes in blue. It's been down a long road and it got dirty on the way. If I give it to you, will you make it clean and wash the pain away? You can have my heart if you don't mind broken things. You can have my heart if you don't mind these tears. But I heard that you make all things new, so I give these pieces all to you. If you want it, you can have my heart. So beyond repair, nothing I could do. Tried to fix it myself, but it was only worse when I got through. Then you walk right into my darkness, and you speak words so sweet. You hold me like a child till my frozen tears fall at your feet. You can have my heart if you don't mind broken things. You can have my heart if you don't mind these tears. But I heard that you make all things new, so I give these pieces all to you. If you want it, you can have my heart.
Once again, the Prime Minister cancelled other engagements to be here. The bombing led to the introduction of new anti-terrorist laws, and 2 weeks later, the perpetrators of the attack, the real IRA, declared a ceasefire. Meanwhile, Gerry Adams, under pressure to say that the war was over, said violence should be a thing of the past. Martin McGuinness became Sinn Féin's representative to the decommissioning body. Some were lucky enough to get grandstand seats as the Clinton Roadshow rolled into town in early September. The First Lady arrived a day before her husband, but made the most of the intervening hours. She attended a number of engagements, including this high-profile women's conference in Belfast. The shadow of the Monica Lewinsky affair weighed heavily on the visit, but if she was feeling the strain, Hillary Clinton hid it well. As the President arrived in Air Force One, the big news story of the morning was his influence on David Trimble and Gerry Adams to meet face to face for the first time. He took a moment to finish his cup of coffee before stepping off the plane to begin a visit which the White House spin doctors hoped would distract attention from his difficulties at home. His first task was to meet the assembled dignitaries, but before he boarded the presidential limousine, he was handed a copy of that morning's London Independent. The smile on Mr. Clinton's face showed that it was just the news he'd been hoping for. Then the visit began in earnest, as men talking up their sleeves indicated that the time was right for their boss's motorcade to proceed to Stormont. The line of vehicles swept up the avenue to Parliament buildings, and here was yet another occasion for the word historic.
Assembly members, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of the United States, Mr. William Jefferson Clinton, and the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Tony Blair.
For such an illustrious moment in the life of the fledgling Assembly, the atmosphere was surprisingly relaxed as David Trimble did the introductions.
James Leslie.
How are you? Thank you. I like your tie.
But the president clearly had a favourite among his hosts.
I won't feel official if you're sitting there. If you're not sitting there, I won't feel official.
I'm taking up my new role as tea lady.
I'll get you coffee. You won't get me any. If you don't sit there, I won't feel
I'll be in trouble. Okay, I'll bring it straight away.
So where are we, guys?
Unionist, nationalist and US Democrat chatted like old friends as the cars arrived to take Mr. Clinton to his first encounter, on this visit at least, with the Northern Ireland public. The loud welcome was another indication that the Monica Lewinsky scandal was half a world away. At Belfast Waterfront Hall, Seamus Mallon paid a warm tribute to the president.
You have delivered on your commitment. Against all the odds, you have helped us break free from a violent and bitter past to set forth on the awesome yet exciting road on our new journey of hope.
Mr. Clinton replied by reminding Assembly members of their obligations.
You owe it to your country to nurture the best in your people by showing them the best in yourselves. Difficult, sometimes wrenching decisions lie ahead, but they must be made. And because you have agreed to share responsibility, whenever possible, you must try to act in concert, not conflict, to overcome obstacles, not create them, to rise above petty disputes, not fuel them.
Martin McGuinness used the occasion to have a word with the man in charge of weapons decommissioning, General Jean de Chastelain. Then, with the handshakes over, the American president, the British Prime Minister and their wives embarked on the most solemn duty of the trip. The motorcade drew into Omagh in late afternoon. It had been agreed that this would have the character of a private visit. The president would meet the relatives of those who died in the bombing, but media coverage would be kept to a minimum. After unveiling a plaque to the victims, it was on to meet the assembled crowds. Mr. Clinton was apparently deeply touched by the whole event.
I think it's marvellous that President Clinton and the First Lady came to Omagh, and Mr. Blair and his good wife, and just to even get talking to them and like sort of man to man, and they've been, I think they were very, very emotional, and I do think they understand what we are going through at the moment.
On the last of the day's engagements in Armagh, the president played the ancestral card to rapturous applause.
Most believe the 18th century Cassidys, my mother's people, were from County Fermanagh. Most believe that those people were my forebears. And I have a painted watercolor of an 18th century farmhouse on our wall at the White House to prove it. The truth is, I can't be sure, so I'll save all the genealogists a lot of trouble by saying, wherever I am tonight, it is good to be home in Northern Ireland.
It was a successful opening day of the visit, but the next morning, as he met the Taoiseach, Bertie Ahern, in Dublin, an American reporter dared to ask the $64,000 question about that woman.
President, do you have any comment on Senator Lieberman's remarks?
I made a bad mistake. It was indefensible, and I'm sorry about it. So I have nothing else to say except that I can't disagree with anyone else who wants to be critical of what I have already acknowledged was indefensible.
His apology wasn't enough for the American establishment. As he toured a computer factory near Dublin, the slow machinery of impeachment had begun to move. Gerry Adams walked past an impassive Lord Craigavon as he prepared to meet the current Unionist leader. It would take some initial contacts between party delegations and a little political manoeuvring before the men spoke one-to-one. Eventually they did so in the First Minister's office.
He is a man who I can do business with, he's a man that I have to do business with, and he's a man that I will do business with, because this is more important than the personalities involved.
The meeting today was civilised and workmanlike. It is an inevitable fact of involvement in politics, whether here or in Westminster, that you have to meet and work with a range of people, and they're not all angels.
In the background, the government was keeping its side of the Stormont Agreement. Relieved soldiers finished their last patrol on the streets of Belfast. Then the first prisoners to benefit from the early release scheme walked out of the maze. The first batch of men to win their freedom were loyalists. Some were more than a little camera shy as they headed for home. Soon the first Republicans also walked through the gates of the jail, but were no more forthcoming when questioned by reporters.
Any comment to make? No comment.
As the year ends, more than 200 people serving sentences for terrorist offences have already been released early. There was a transformation at Parliament buildings, badly damaged by fire 3 years previously. The interior was restored to its former glory, but to the amusement of Ian Paisley, a bar had been added during the renovations.
There's a wee line that says, well, a bar to heaven, a door to hell. Whoever named it well.
It seemed that more changes were happening by the day.
I want to make friends with Dr. Paisley and with those who he represents.
The politicians, as always, demonstrated their talent for dark humour.
We've had this great success today at the Commonwealth Games, where we won one of the shooting competitions. Incidentally, I'm glad to see Mr. Adams laughing, because it was with legal firearms.
In a different political arena, the Labour Party conference, Mo Mowlam won the supreme accolade for her work in Northern Ireland.
I think I can say without fear of contradiction that that's the first time there's been a standing ovation in the middle of a speech. And the person getting the ovation isn't even the person making the speech.
The standoff at Drumcree led to further disturbances. A subsequent riot would claim the life of a young police officer. Constable Frank O'Reilly, injured by a blast bomb in September, died later in hospital. In Madrid, some of the surviving victims of the Omagh bomb attended a special mass to commemorate those who died. Councillors from Omagh and Buncrana joined them in this act of remembrance. In Belfast, yet another murder was committed by loyalist terrorists. Brian Service, who'd been walking home in the north of the city, was shot dead by the hitherto unknown Red Hand defenders. Sinn Féin were about to hit the headlines again as more than 80 Assembly members visited Brussels and Strasbourg. A stunt to highlight the Irish language backfired as the Secretary-General of the European Commission, Carlo Troyan, took offence.
I haven't understood a word of what you have been saying.
Vous n'avez pas respecté la langue d'Irlande. J'ai parlé en gaélique et vous n'avez pas respecté.
Jij wilt talen dansmedaille. Jij wilt talen dansmedaille. Wat voor zware doe ik, hè?
So
that was Danish. That was
yes,
Danish.
Well, I respect your right to speak Danish.
I respect the right that you don't understand Danish.
But I don't. You caused laughter among unionist representatives.
Right?
You have no respect for Irish.
No, you have no respect for me when you put me a question in Gaelic of which you know I don't understand.
He spoke in English as well. He spoke in English, and I thought your response and your playing to the unionist audience that are part of this delegation actually played completely into their hands, because this is an issue, and I think you should have been better briefed, at least, if that wasn't the situation.
Don't give me that shit.
A more dignified meeting of cultures took place on the 80th anniversary of the end of the First World War. Messines in Belgium was the setting for the first public engagement involving the British and Irish heads of state. It paved the way for a possible visit to Ireland by the Queen in the not-too-distant future. It was a path already trodden by Tony Blair, who, in November, became the first British Prime Minister to address both houses of the Irish Parliament.
The peace process, as we know, is at a difficult juncture. Progress is being made, but slowly. There is an impasse over the establishment of the executive. There is an impasse over decommissioning.
Symbolism was dominant once again as John Hume and David Trimble shared the Nobel Peace Prize. But the Ulster Unionist leader continued to focus on another, so far unattainable prize in the quest for a permanent end to violence.
But I cannot forever convince society that real peace is at hand if there is not a beginning to the decommissioning of weapons as an earnest of the decommissioning of hearts that must follow.
As Christmas approached, the LVF became the first terrorist group to embark on the handing over of weapons. Several firearms were destroyed by angle grinder, while a quantity of munitions was blown up on army property the same day. Hours earlier, agreement had been reached at Stormont on the number of ministerial posts in the new executive and the formation of cross-border institutions. But as the year ends, the wider decommissioning issue is unresolved, as is the now perennial question of Drumcree.